Welcome to the Understanding Project Management Discussions podcast. This is Dave Barrett. My guest today is Jeffrey Thomson. Jeffrey is an experienced consultant in a number of areas, including procurement and contract, program, and intellectual asset management. Our topic today is the management of project costs. During our discussion, Jeffrey outlines why this is such an important aspect of project management. Please welcome Jeffrey Thomson. Good to see you. How are things?
Good to see you, Dave. Not bad. We've been getting our winter storms right now, so that's always fun here in Canada. So
that time of year. So our topic for discussion today is all things cost, sort of the cost constraint of projects. And just to kick things off, in my experience, I found that all of the constraints are important for a project, but there's something special about cost, particularly for customers or project sponsors. And have you found that too, or what's your thought?
Oh, absolutely. It's cost is usually the first thing my project sponsor or product managers or key stakeholders will say. How are we doing on the costs? How are we trending? What's our burn rate? And they all have those questions, and those are usually the first ones they come out, followed very closely by schedule, right? How are we doing with the schedule? Because, and it's natural, because the two really intertwine very well. And so that's what's in their mind. Am I on time, and what's the cost? So right. You're right. There are some special ones of the 6 constraints, and cost is right up there at the top.
Yeah. So why is that? What is it that brings cost to the forefront, and therefore why, as project managers, should we be aware of that and able to answer that?
Yeah, because cost, in my experience over the years, cost is one of the constraints that I call it the runaway train. It can get going very quickly off the tracks. Schedule, you're much closer to your schedule day to day, but some of your costs don't come into your project until a month, 30 days, 60 days later, especially if you have vendors working on your project. Their invoicing process and your payroll, your accounts payable team could be out of sync by 30 to 60 days. And if you're not watching closely, you all of a sudden get this massive hit of costs in 1 month when you really expected them to be, drawn out, month to month to month. And that's always nice to say it will happen, but it doesn't. A lot of times, a lot of your costs come all at once, and now you're not trying to balance everything out. Cost is always something in the past. You're always looking at it from the past. What happened? And then you're planning forward. But it's always a catch-up game.
Right.
And that's why costs can get off track quicker than your others. And also, people are very cost conscious in business these days. Margins are so tight,
right,
that we need to make sure our projects stay really tight on the cost. So yeah. Big focus by everybody in companies about the cost of a project.
Yeah, 2 key points that I wanted to just summarize or just go back to. One is the thing you just said, which is cost is margins are getting tighter and tighter. Competition is increasing so much in businesses that there just isn't room for big cost overruns in projects. So that sensitivity to the bottom line, that's one of the reasons why you're going to get customers and sponsors just focusing on that, because they're managing their margins. And if you go over by 10% or some, that just cuts into their, they're going to lose business. So it's hugely important. Yeah, the other thing was I thought was really, really interesting is that sort of costs come all at once. It's kind of like, and I'm thinking of the weather right now and where we are. It's like the weather. It can be, hey, we've had no snow for 6 days, everything's fine, and then a
Yep.
blizzard comes. All of
Exactly.
a sudden, and it's not like the snow doesn't average out, you
No.
know, to 7 days in a week. It comes often in one day,
Right.
and it's sort of that delayed. And the reason why in cost is because of, you mentioned the delay sometimes of costs coming in,
Right.
because of billing cycles and invoicing and so on, that they don't happen instantly with what you're doing, as there's often a delay, which then
Yeah.
causes these spikes in costs that
Exactly.
so monitoring is important, I would take.
Monitoring it is critical. And I'll add one more is in our other constraint of resource. Our resources are supposed to charge their time to your project. Many organizations do cost accounting or resource accounting. Some companies don't do it anymore, to be quite honest, because they have found that they're constantly having to update things, and the charges aren't always accurate. And that is a big challenge, because you'd have a project team, and I'd always say to the project team, get your hours in submitted, especially in the consulting industry. Get your hours in on Fridays, so that I know, so that I can bill my client, and I'm not surprising my client. But the resources don't always do that. And they wait a week, and then, well, that's next week. Now they got to figure out what they did 2 weeks ago. And then you get some people who wait 4 weeks. And if the project manager is not saying, hey, get those charges in now, they're very important, then what happens is, again, the project manager is trying to figure out what was the real resource cost throughout the month, and then passing it on to the client.
Right.
And that's a big challenge for a lot of organizations. Again, people do simply enter their time. Sounds simple, sounds easy,
Oh, I know. Oh,
but they don't. It's human nature. Some of them are diligent, but most people are, oh, it's 5 minutes to 5 on Friday afternoon, and I got to do my time entry. I'll do it next week.
Right. Oh, I can attest to that. In a previous, in a few jobs back, I was in a role, a systems development role, where I needed to track my time, and I
Mhm.
can absolutely say with truth that's the last thing I wanted to do.
Right.
And I was not alone. Everybody that I was working with is like, oh, it's the end of the week.
Exactly.
I can either spend a few minutes doing this, or I can go home, and
Hmm.
I want to go home,
I
right?
want
So
to. Yeah,
I got
exactly. We all do.
and then, like you say, okay, the month end is coming, so I'm just going to fill out all my timesheets for the whole month.
Right.
Well, in terms of, you can think of what was that doing to the budget, is that it was 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and then everything for a
Yeah.
month. And think of the havoc that would cause to a budget. That's the real world of budgeting.
It is, and so look at it. Take it one step further. Is if you're having a 2 week status report period with your sponsor and with your executives, and you're not getting your finances in every 2 weeks, and they're nice and clean. Uh, all your receivables, all your payables, everything nice and clean each 2 weeks. What happens is you have a good report, and then you have a couple that aren't changing in the cost for some reason, that you're changing your estimate, and you should be right on top of your estimates and maintaining, hey, what is my estimate at completion? But you're not seeing the actuals hitting.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you come into your executive meeting a month later, and all those charges, that winter storm hits you all at once, and you come in, you go, yeah, we just spent in the last month, we're getting hit for 1.5 million in charges, and the eyes light up in the room, and everybody goes, what's happening? Well, what's happening is all these charges are come in, and you can explain them,
Right.
and make sure you can. That's the key. But that's what happens. All of a sudden you get them. So I always preface my project sponsor, my executives, that as we are tracking through, we will have charges that come that are late that will have to be accrued, and I'll mention those to you in my project status reports, things that are delayed, and show you it in my estimate at completion. Show you in an accrual section,
Right.
and so that there are. As all project managers, we don't want to surprise our project
No,
sponsor. The
no, no.
last thing we want to do.
Yes.
So if we can preface them and saying, hey, we're going to get a big hit, it's coming. We know it. We planned for it. So don't have a heart attack.
Right.
That helps. The other is we've got to, at the end of the project, we try to close our project, but we have expenses that are going to come in, 30, 60, 90 days later. So you really can't close your project officially off until all expenditures have been accounted for and paid, et cetera.
Right.
So that's always a challenge as well.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, but I think you've either partially or completely answered it. Is okay. We've gone through all the challenges to the project manager of timesheets not being filled out, delays and costs coming in, and so what is a project manager to do? Now, I think you've answered it. At least part of it is okay. We've got to be talking to our project sponsor and customers of preparing them for costs that haven't occurred yet. But how do you know what hasn't occurred? Like, there's a lot going on in the project. What do you need to have in order to know, hey, I haven't received that invoice yet? That sounds complicated.
It's complicated, but it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
What is the 80% of what we do as project managers is communication, right? We're constantly communicating, and communicating is listening. It's asking questions as well as speaking. So with my vendors, especially if I have vendors, I will ask them, can you send to me on a regular basis the estimate that you're going to charge me? Resources, especially on a resource-based project where I'm buying resources now and then, and we have a budget for it, but I don't always know exactly when I'm going to be hit with it. So I stay close to my vendor on those, and saying, okay, give me a heads up of it. It's not the invoice. I'm not going to sign off, just so I have a record. And then I'll match that against what comes through my accounting department later on, and go, hey, okay, we were pretty darn close. Fair enough. Why were we off? We had to, add an extra developer for 2 days. Very explainable. So if I'm talking with my vendors and being very close with the project manager on the vendor side, that helps out. They want to get paid. They always want to be paid. And I want to pay them, to be quite honest. I don't want to hold things up. I want to pay for what I'm getting. The other is I talk to my accounting team, and I get a relationship going with them. People forget that our accounting department is a stakeholder of our project. We don't count them as our stakeholders. They're just the finance team. Oh no, they're the people who are taking care of all the invoicing and the accruals, et cetera. So I will talk to them and say, I'm watching out for these charges that I expect to get hit with. Can you let me know when they come through? Because they still have to 30-day turnaround time, but they'll let me know. Hey, we got it. It came in. Here's the value. Excellent. They match. This will make it easy. Or, whoa, that's way off base. And now I got to go and investigate. So that communication and working with your stakeholders in the background, like the accounting team, who are very important, they're going to help you, especially when you're trying to close off things, or when you're going over that year end. This is the one that catches project managers all the time on cost, is year end closing of the books.
Right.
And you got to do the accrual of things that are going to be spent or haven't been spent, but will be. And so you need to stay close to your finance team. They'll help you through.
Yeah.
They
No,
always
I
do.
like that, that the finance team, the financial officer, whoever it is in your, they are a stakeholder. You
Yeah,
need to, as a project manager, you need to have some level of knowledge of finances and of
absolutely.
budget process and so on. If you're oblivious to it, it's a key risk. And I like what you were saying about, talking to, whoever it is, the suppliers, or, wherever the costs are coming from, and getting that forecast
Mhm.
of what's likely to come.
Yeah,
That's part of it, is, in terms of, I know in the things that I've taught, um,
there's the grammar.
much, that, forecasting your expected costs. And oftentimes it's a tough sell to those new to project management of, why do I need to do this? Well, then it gives you something to go on. If you have that month where costs are lower
Right.
than normal, the experienced project manager will investigate, will say,
Yeah. They'll say, what
you know,
happened there?
there's at least a couple of reasons. One is costs are lower. The
Hmm.
other is we have costs that haven't been reported yet, but
Yeah.
you need some data. You got to have something to go on, or
I
else you're
like,
guessing.
yeah, I like you are absolutely correct. All project managers, we need to be comfortable in understanding accounting processes. Because if we don't understand, and it doesn't mean you have to become a chartered accountant or CPA or whatever, you just have to understand the basic, capturing your costs, estimating out your costs, and we all know that estimating is one of the most difficult things to do. But staying on top of it, and you know, estimating out, getting good feedback from all your team, and being able to say, okay, I know I need to accrue. And if you don't understand what the word accrue means, you definitely need to look it up,
Mhm,
because you, as a project manager, are going to be doing a lot of accruals.
mhm,
Um, maybe not so much in a 3-month project, but certainly in a year-long project. And the other area that catches us off guard on projects I want to mention on costs is international projects.
mhm.
Um, it's easy when your project is all in one currency. Um,
Right.
and,
Correct.
but when you're operating in different currencies, this is an area that, with the interest rates, or sorry, with exchange rates floating dramatically in some cases, this is an area that really can catch you off guard when you're doing international projects. What I've done, and what a lot of companies do, is we use the U.S. dollar.
Mhm.
We forecast everything in U.S. dollar. We bill in U.S. dollar. It sounds strange for a lot of people. Why don't we do it in Canadian? Well, the Canadian dollar fluctuates against other currencies a lot more than the U.S. dollar does.
Right.
So understanding that, and then talking to your finance department, and this again, going back to your accountants, what price should I use, exchange rate should I use for the US dollar when I'm planning out my budget, and they'll give you a rate. And that's an area where you will see some dips and dives, but you'll be able to explain them,
Right.
and your finance team will be able to too.
Right. Right.
And if you're working on a $100,000 or $200,000 project, no no big deal. But when your project is 100 million,
Yeah.
$200 million,
It's a big deal.
a big deal when it changes 1 cent. So
Yes, the leverage of that. I mean, that brings an important point, and one of the reasons why I think I was always drawn to project management is that you need to know something about a lot of things. It's
yes,
like you said, you don't have to be a chartered accountant to be a
no,
project manager. But you need to know enough about it to be able to talk to a chartered accountant, to be able to
yeah,
be conversant. And so, like you said, if you don't understand what accrual means, look it up,
yeah,
or become knowledgeable enough in it so that you can work, and interact with your finance stakeholders. And we could apply that to many different areas of project management.
Absolutely. You know, I agree. That's one of the things I love about project management is we have to learn a lot. And we've had, you know, you and I are gray hairs, I'll admit it, or no hair, but we've had to learn a lot about project management over the years that we didn't at the very beginning. We didn't need to know all these things. We certainly started to see the world in project management become more and more complex, and therefore we had to, you know, to continue our education, you know, to understand. We went from what was called the 3 constraints to now the 6 constraints, which are, yeah, that was a big change in project management.
Yep.
But the other 6, the other 3 constraints were always there. We just didn't understand them well enough.
Right.
Now we do. So continuous education of a project manager, that's very important. So if your expertise is scheduling and risk management, but cost is not one that you're very good at, I would pick up some textbooks, pick up a little extra learning on the accounting side, and this is where we have to always keep our saw sharp, as
Yep.
they said.
Yes.
And that's a great thing for that I like about project management. I'm constantly learning
Yeah.
new things.
I agree. It's a good. I've always said if you love diversity of challenges and of every day being a little different, it's the discipline for you. The one thing
Yeah.
I'd add, I agree with the continuous learning and so on. The other part I'd add to that is know your limitations as well as a project manager. For example, and I'll be perfectly honest, is that I was not necessarily the world's best scheduler as a
Right.
project. I'm good. I could
Mhm.
certainly do it and so on. But if I needed someone if I had a project that was highly time dependent with lots of complex dependencies, I made sure I got somebody, somebody to.
One of the things, a lot of people think that project managers are the leader. We are the experts in everything. We come into the meeting and we are supposed to know it all. No, that's so wrong. We are not the leaders. I'm not I did some development work, software development work back in the 1980s. So that's a pretty long time ago. So I do not pretend to be a developer. I look to my developers to give me that expert information, on how long is something going to take. What's the status on that development? I'm not an accountant, but I'm also smart enough to go and say, okay, I understand these concepts. I'm going to be asking these questions. And I'm going to go talk with my finance people, but I'm going to let them lead. So as a project manager, we're facilitators, we're coaches, we're mentors, we're all these wonderful things. And at times we are leaders, we have to be,
Right.
but we're not always the leader. And and I think that's what gets a lot of PMs in trouble, is that they think they know it all, and
in trouble early, I'd say. New project managers will try to be the last word on everything, and there's times when you need to defer to.
Yeah, exactly. And I've had in projects, we all have crises that happen in our projects. A major risk hits, or major issues pop up. Yeah, and you assemble the team, and I'll look and what is the problem? Is the problem in the testing in software? I'll look at the software lead and say, okay, lead us through the issue. If it's in a construction section, I can't tell you what the right mixture is for concrete for a bridge, nor do I know.
Nor should you.
Nor should I. Trust me, you don't want me to. But I'll look at the engineers, I'll look at the architects and say, okay, why are we having to make this change? Because it's going to have a huge cost impact, as we know. So being able to ask the questions. So being a general and being able to ask your troops what's happening,
Yeah.
and being able to take that information, use that information, and march the team forward.
Right.
That's what we are, and that's what I love. I don't know about you, but I've never had the same day
No,
twice in a row as a project manager over the years,
that's
over the 30 plus years.
that's both the beauty and sometimes the scary part for new people. One last question before we wrap up is
Mhm.
okay, let's say you've done everything you can, you've done good cost management, you've tried and tried, but you've got to go to your project sponsor and deliver the news
Yeah.
that your project is going to be over budget. It's every project manager's worst night. What, any words of advice if you need to
Yeah.
walk into that meeting?
Well, you will walk into that meeting. It will happen one day. It's inevitable. So don't fear that day. And the reason I say don't fear it is if you go in prepared with the facts, always go with the facts. Here's where we were. Here's how we were estimating. Here's what happened. We had a change that we did not estimate very well. We did the change order. Everybody did the change order. We followed the process, but something else came in and we weren't able to, we didn't pick it up in time. Here's why. So bringing in the why, the facts of the situation, and then taking those facts and demonstrating to your executives how it happened and why it won't happen again.
Right.
So you have a lesson learned
Right.
situation. I had an unfortunate, if I may share an experience I had. I took over a project from a project manager, and this individual was leaving the project midway, and the project was a 2-year project. They had only planned and estimated the first year because they knew they weren't going to be around for the second part.
Mm-hmm.
But the senior management were under the impression that year 2 had all been planned out and costed. When I came in, I'm taking a look at it and I'm going, those numbers don't look right because they're really going to be in the execution phase when we know our costs are very high. And so I did some more digging and researching and found out they had not been done. They had just been ballparked, a number thrown in there. And I did some dig and working with all my major stakeholders, the development leads, the QA leads, et cetera. We came and did a full budget for the second part. And we came to our executive sponsors on a $50 million project, and we came in and said, I need another $15 million. You can imagine how that meeting went. It was a shock to everybody, but it really wasn't a shock because I talked to the project sponsor several days before, said, I got some bad news coming. Let me get you the facts and let you get, how we're going to present. And we worked together. We got the communication out there that there was something coming. So that meeting actually was not a bad meeting.
Yes.
Because we had all of our facts.
Yes.
So I always say to project managers, whether it's cost, whether it's schedule, whether it's risk, whether it's anything, have your facts. Take the facts, take the hard news to your sponsors and executives, but use the facts.
Yeah,
And
no, I agree. I agree. That's where communication comes in. And if you are open and honest and tell them as soon as you can,
yes,
they'll respect you for that. So,
and they'll believe you too. It's quite amazing. They'll actually go, oh, somebody who wasn't afraid, who wasn't trying to sweep it under the rug
right.
on
Right.
us.
Yeah, no, that's
Which
good. So
happens.
anyways, Jeff, this has been a great conversation on
Yeah.
cost. I think you've shared much of your rich experience. So again, I thank you for this, and it was great talking with you today.
Great talking with you, Dave, as always.
Okay.